Welcome to the Positive Growth Doctor podcast for women. I am your host, Dr. Christina Wilson. I created the Positive Growth Doctor after years of dealing with societal expectations, self-doubt, and perfectionism. I leveraged my 30 years of experience as a positive psychologist to address limiting beliefs and gain clarity through faith-based emotional wellness techniques rooted in mindset renewal and biblical truth. Subscribe to the podcast and check out the earlier episodes so you don't miss a thing. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Positive Growth Doctor podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christina Wilson. I have a question for you to ponder. Are you ready? Are you making decisions about your family or your future based on God's pace, or are you reacting to the ticking clock of societal pressure? Now, remember that God doesn't call the qualified, and you probably have heard this before. He qualifies the called, which is great news for us, right? Because we're trying to figure out so many things in life. So why not just let him have control over that, like the bigger picture? Why try to handle that ourselves? So in this episode, we look at biblical truths for the battlefield, and we will explore how we can practice active waiting, serving God fully in our current season while holding our desires for the next. So find the full transcript for this episode in your favorite podcast app and share the podcast with other women to help them grow. And you can also leave, if you want to extend your reach further to many more women, it's simple. You can just leave a review on Apple Podcast. I appreciate you. So the theme for this episode is deciding on marriage, motherhood, or whatever it might be, and trusting God's timeline. Now, the decision to marry and have children it's big and full of fear. There's fear of losing yourself, fear of the future, or even the pain of waiting. We're not good at waiting, are we? Not in this society. And, God didn't create us that way, but society has molded us that way. And that's problematic. It makes things much more difficult than it has to be. So this episode speaks to the mindset of trusting God with our legacy. It is a topic that really hit home for me. At one point, I thought that God didn't intend for me to even get married or have children. But he had other things for me to do along the way. And so I just thought, okay, it's taken a really, really long time. So this is, I was okay with that. And I just decided, to be okay and just embrace what he did have at that time. Now, sometimes it's the case where he doesn't, intend for someone to get married or have children. And that's okay, because he does have something wonderful for you. So, as some of you know, I didn't have a solid foundation based on my parents' marriage. They divorced when I was 4 and then again when I was 5. And that is a whole other episode. But I was married to my work for many, many years. And it was the Lord's work. And I loved it. It was wonderful. But I want to share this with you. So I need for you to listen closely. Please hear me when I say that rejection is protection. Okay. So someone's rejection of you does not define you, period. And it might be, and probably is, preparing you along the way for something even more beautiful and bigger than you can imagine. Now, I always say that I kissed a lot of frogs along the way, but let's be real. I stayed in these relationships way too long. And I know that it wasn't what God had for me. And, some wanted marriage, but I knew that it wasn't of God. And after experiencing my parents, I was not willing to even go there. So I was literally 40 when I met my husband, and I knew right away because God told me, and he was worth the wait. And we got married soon after, and I got pregnant right away. Even though two doctors had told me that I would never get pregnant, I would never have children. So not only that, but God was clear that He had big plans for this child. And talk about the heaviness of this. By the way, He has big plans for all children and for all of us, as long as we are willing to step into it. But I knew that God planned to use my son to bring others closer to Him. And it has been the most beautiful thing to watch. And I'm so thankful for that I was a part of that plan as well. Now, there was a lot of pain along the way because it took a very, very long time. Most of my friends had already had children that had grown, and I was just getting started. But that pain prepared me for something much bigger and much better. Now, let's shift a bit to spiritual warfare. The enemy uses the fear of missing out all the time, or the lie that our biological or marital status defines our worth. That's another one of his lies. And the biblical principle for this episode comes from the story of Hannah in 1 Samuel 1. She brought her deep desire for a child to God first and surrendered the outcome and trusted His timing. So, do you trust His timing? Or are you trying to control it by excessively thinking about it, or worrying about it? Have you let go and given it fully to God? Yes, it's true. God has a plan for you. And it might not include a husband or children, but it is a beautiful, beautiful plan nonetheless. Now, Satan tells women that they have to have a husband to be happy, or they have to have this or that, the house, the money, in order to be happy. By the way, that comes from societal expectations too. Hint, that comes from the world. Thus, it comes from Satan. See how that works? In fact, James 1:16 through 27, I believe, reminds us that marriage does not guarantee happiness. No one and nothing makes us happy if we're apart from God. It's very important. And the second thing that I want to explore with you is the idea of not having children. When you have children, that adds a whole layer to life that isn't always easy. I used to teach parenting groups for many years, and usually parents were there not on their own accord, by the way, and they weren't very happy that someone who never had children or never been a mother was telling them what they thought was how to raise their children. In fact, they would ask me, why I was even there to help them in that area. But I reminded them that I was once a child and I had parents who taught me what to do and what not to do. And there's more than one perspective in addition to the theoretical one. Also, I've learned so much from parents like them over the years, and I'm so thankful for that. So it never failed at the very end of the course. They loved it so much. And they said, "Well, can I do this again?" So I must have been doing something right, even though I had never been a mom before at that point in my life. You see, He prepares us along the way for what He has for us. And my parents had lost a child when my mom got pregnant with me a couple years later. My dad was not very happy about it. There's a lot of fear. If you've ever lost a child, you don't want to do that again, right? And that's exactly it. He didn't want to go through that. In fact, the loss of that child was so painful that he ended up getting a vasectomy. Um, after learning, that I was coming. However, when I was born, they say he just looked at me with just such love. And, he just couldn't believe that he made, this baby, this amazing baby. But, the newness wore off and, that didn't last for too long. But be mindful that he was not in lockstep with God. So I'm telling you this, even though it is painful for me. I'm telling you this because I want to show you what it's like when you aren't in lockstep with God and you're doing life on your own terms, right? He didn't have a family. He didn't grow up with a family that really showed him how to parent and how to be a husband, and all of that. And, there's a lot of alcoholism and addiction. So my mom and I were just secondary to that, unfortunately. He didn't grow up in church. So sadly, he wasn't the dad that I needed him to be, as a result. But, and that is what it's like when you step away from God's calling. Okay. You miss out. So you might choose to focus on obtaining a family or wait on God's timing and what He has in store for you. And know that the spirit of peace, it comes from knowing that your seasons are held by Him, not by societal guidelines. Okay. There's just so much pressure, societal pressure that we go through as women. Now, I want to leave you with these two truths. Okay. Trust God with your decisions. Commit to the Lord. Okay. Commit to the Lord in whatever you do. In Proverbs 16. And also, in all your ways, submit to Him. Proverbs 3. I hope this helped. And let's meet up again next week because we are going to dive into a whole new series. Have a wonderful week and be blessed. I appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to the Positive Growth Doctor podcast. Be sure to leave a review and tell other women about the podcast. Let's support each other. Find the full transcript for this episode on your favorite podcast app and learn more at thepositivegrowthdoctor.com. And be assured, you are not alone on your journey.